Bank here on the Voice of Indiana County, WCCS 101.1 FM and AM 1160. And it's time now for another interview segment presented by Marcus and Mack, a law firm representing injured people. And this is your chance to interact with us. Give us a call at 724-479-1160 or 724-349-WCCS, and we'll get you on the phone with Bob Pollock of the Penn State Extension Office. Bob, it is good to see you and to talk with you once again. How you doing this morning?
Likewise, good to be here.
How you doing?
Good, I'm doing well this week.
Excellent. Well, it looks like a lot of people have been dodging raindrops this week. We've been getting, I guess we could say, some strong storms in some parts, other areas, intermittent showers. So it brings to mind, how are we doing on the water tables? Are we at where we should be right now?
Yeah, pretty much so. If we look at the last precipitation in the last week, we're actually ahead of normal. We've received, according to the official data, 2.4 inches of rain in the last 7 days, and that's as of 7/14. So that would have been on Wednesday.
Now
which is 1.3 inches above normal.
Okay, that's good.
So most of the state is in that situation. The vast majority of the state received more than normal rainfall. And then if we look for the bigger picture of where that puts us for the year, we are still a little bit behind. We've received 23.3 inches of rain, and that puts us 1.1 inches behind normal for the year. So that's pretty close. That's
so we're doing pretty good on the water levels. That actually suits fine, because my experience with just a small vegetable garden that I've had at my mom and dad's house. I mean, but that's very good news. The fact that we are actually above normal. And even though we had a string of days this year, that was the big concern. We had, I think, a run of 2 or 3 weeks where it didn't rain or it rained very little. Now we're getting, like, just about every day at a certain period of time, a shower or a thunderstorm. It's almost like living in Florida where you can almost predict at the hour.
Yeah, that's true. And then the sun comes back out. So in some ways that's kind of nice because you get that wetting period or the wet spell, and then we still have enough time to dry things out, because that's pretty important disease-wise.
It is.
So plants, the longer their leaves are wet, the more often their leaves are wet, then that increases the chance for disease issues. So if we think about something like a tomato plant as an example, throughout the country they do monitor for some of the major diseases like late blight, which affects both tomatoes and potatoes. And right now, there have been no incidences, no recorded incidences of
That's good.
late blight throughout the whole eastern part of the country. There's a disease called downy mildew, which is very common on cucurbits or cucumbers.
Cucumbers,
the plant in the squash family. That's very common on there and can wipe that whole plant out. There have been documented cases of that from all the way from Florida up through the east and into Pennsylvania. But it's sporadic. It's mostly been documented in eastern Pennsylvania so far.
So having this drying out period, it prevents them from getting these diseases.
Well, it helps reduce the chances
okay,
that they'll get it.
All right.
Because most of the plants are susceptible to it. There are some varieties of tomatoes that have resistance. So when they've bred new varieties, they've been able to, isolate the genetics in the plant that make it susceptible to certain diseases, late blight being an example, and then they've been able to breed resistance into those plants. But the vast majority of all the tomato varieties, and there's thousands of them, that can be grown, and people have saved seed for generations and passed that down. A lot of those are susceptible in some stage.
We did get a question from somebody here that says, my grandpa always said, water your tomato plants once, right after you plant them. After that, walk away and let the rain take care of it. And according to this grandfather, he said this will help grow bigger roots. Is this right? Is this an old wives' tale?
Well, as long as we get enough rainfall, if we get in like we had earlier, those 3-week period of no rain at all, then we can start to get stress on plants. However, when the plant has to reach for moisture, it can grow a deeper root system. If the moisture is always there, if there's adequate moisture all the way up to the surface of the ground, then the plant doesn't have to work as hard. It doesn't have to send out as many roots because the moisture's there. So sometimes on drier years, you might have a bigger, larger root system because that plant had to seek out, reach out to get every drop of moisture that it could.
So semi-correct. We can. If this was MythBusters, it would be plausible. But
Plausible.
But you just have to watch. I guess you just have to watch the water conditions.
Right. So you go too long, the plant will droop, shrivel up, and it might die, or it might be stressed to the point where it doesn't fully recover. A lot of times we can get plants that will wilt down to some stage, and they can still be okay. Oftentimes, and even there at the end of June, corn plants, some fields were starting to what we call pineapple, or look more like the leaves on a pineapple plant.
Yeah, those
because
things.
they were stressed from not having enough moisture at that point. But we've gotten out of that. Most stands look almost excellent at this point.
Yeah, I can definitely tell you the corn, at least in Indiana County, from a certain market this year, is looking pretty good.
Very
and
good.
Tasting
Very good.
pretty good, too. 724-479-1160, 724-349-WCCS. If you want to call into Bob Pollock, I recommend you do so now. Bob.
And then the other thing we talk about is, overhead watering versus watering the soil.
Yeah, doing an irrigation type system versus sprinkling from a water can in this case.
Yeah, so with nature, we get the rainfall from above,
right,
which is going to wet the whole plant. But if we have to supplement that, it's best to do it, water the roots. Don't water the whole plant. Sometimes we might have a sprinkler, and we're not able to stand there with a hose and go around and water the root system of each individual plant.
Right.
But if you had the choice, we'd rather just water the roots, keep the plant dry.
Yeah.
And that helps also minimize the risk for disease problems cropping up as we go through the season.
So it would be better if in the case of like the backyard gardener, it would be best to go around with the watering can and aim right for the root system.
Yes.
And rather than hit all the leaves in this case.
Yep.
All right, so you know what? This actually sounds like an idea. Why don't we bust another myth when it comes to like for the home gardener? I mean, because home gardeners hear a lot of things. I mean, we had the example here from one of the questions. What's another myth that you've heard over the years from home gardeners about their work, about gardening in general?
There's a good question. Trying to think of a good example
and
of that.
And if anybody out there on radio has a myth you want busted, give us a call, please. 724-479-1160, 724-349-WCCS. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes planting times, a lot of times we'll plant a garden and we'll try to get it all worked up, get it all planted at the same time. Mm-hmm. And that can work. However, there are plants that like warmer conditions. They like both warmer soil conditions as well as warmer air conditions. And other plants, examples are peas, the cold crops like broccoli and cauliflower that like cooler weather. So they like to be planted earlier so that you can harvest them earlier. Sometimes if we plant them too late, then they will bolt, which means it gets too warm, they get stressed, and then instead of having that nice head of broccoli, it goes into the temperatures and the conditions send it into flowering stage so that it can shoot up a stalk and produce seed because it feels like it's getting stressed.
Yeah.
It's not going to complete its life cycle.
So it's going to try to do something about it.
Yes, it's going to try to do something about it, and so that can be prompted by that. So planting at different times, and then also hedging your bets and not planting everything at one time because we might get a drought we might get very hot conditions for a period of time. So plants might, well, tomato plants, when we get up into the 90s, mid-90s or above, if they're flowering, they may just shed those or abort those flowers and not produce any fruit because of those stressful conditions. So if we have planting staggered, then that gives us a better chance that we're going to get some crop if we do it that way. Okay. And then also those early season crops, sometimes we can plant those. We're moving into the period where we could plant those for a fall crop now.
Ah, okay.
Now, oftentimes we have to start those by seed. Most of the transplants that people grow and sell, those are all done in the spring.
I remember those. I remember those.
Which kind of forces us to do a lot of that planting in the springtime. But some of the shorter day crops, we can plant those in August, even sometimes into September, and still get a nice fall crop. Brussels sprouts, they take a little longer to grow, but they will produce a much better, more consistent crop if we plant those in July into August and then let them mature even into October and November. They'll have better flavor, better quality, and you'll be able to get better yields.
So right now is the time of year to get those late summer plants into the ground. Okay.
And a lot of times we have to start those by seed, which you can actually sow those right into the garden, or you can sow those yourself in a flat, and then make your own transplants to plant into your garden. And then you just have to figure out, well, how long is it going to take for those to germinate, which might be a week. In our warmer conditions like this, and if you have them outside or if you have them in a greenhouse, that can, even in a few days under these kind of weather conditions, those things can germinate. And then it's usually 4 to 6 weeks is the time frame you need to grow that plant to a size that you can transplant it into the garden.
All right. We're at the mark.
There we go.
Hey, but you know what? That I feel better. I feel encouraged.
There you go. Sow some seeds today.
We'll see what happens. Robert, thank you very much
welcome.
for joining us here on Indiana in the Morning, presented by First Commonwealth Bank here on the Voice of Indiana County.